Welcome to O-Talkin' with Dave. Put your hands together for the pastor of positivity whose glass is always at least half full. Here's Dave.
Hey, how we doing out there? I hope you're great. I am top shelf and climbing the walls. Good stuff. Thanks for all the emails. I'm getting so many suggestions. You guys are triggering me in so many ways. I look forward to getting to all of your content that you're asking for. But right now, we're making gravy. Oh, thank God for the gravy. That is a I've heard comedians say, gravy goes with a dish. It's a condiment. I consider it a beverage. You gotta love it. So the topic today, it's really helps me deal with people that are always so negative. Oh no, woe is me. Doom and gloom. It's probably not gonna work out. We're probably going to have a flat tire, and then we're probably not going to have a spare, and we're going to be late, and it's probably going to rain. You have to plan for things, but don't dwell on them. And so that's one character trait that we're probably not going to hang out much together if you're always so negative. I mean, everybody's got a story. We've all had things happen to us, and we will again. But the people that go to that worst case scenario all the time, I don't enjoy their company. However, for this podcast, I'm going to lean into it. All right, let's go. Let's think. What's the absolute worst thing that could happen? Debbie Downer, come on. The worst thing that could happen. Because if you take that mentality, and I'm going to embrace it for the next 45 minutes, if you embrace that worst case scenario, and the worst case scenario doesn't happen, well, that's all gravy. And Dave loves gravy. So let's talk about it. Some people, they're bent toward that negativity. And I think it's a psychological thing. It could be from history. They've had a tough time. I notice that usually negative parents have negative kids. So it's a character trait to some degree. But why is that prevalent? Why do people go toward the worst case scenario? And I think there's several reasons. Part of it is, I think maybe it's an instinct, a survival instinct. They're wired to that negative bias because that way they're not surprised. That way it's, okay, all right, that's probably what's going to happen. And they focus more on the potential dangers or the risk involved in something than the reward. Or what if everything goes right? But I think that's almost an evolutionary thing. And then you have trauma from the past. Some people are so scarred by the things that have happened to them, whether it's a failure or disappointments. Maybe they've been betrayed by somebody in the past. They tend to expect the worst out of people. And so I feel bad for those people. They should hang around Dave more, I mean, I may let you down, but we'll have a good time on the trip. And then part of it is, it could be environmental, the environment that they grow up in. It could be the environment in a toxic workplace, a negative culture there. It could be, like I said, negative parents. It could be just a family thing. It's come down. A lot of cultures, they like to lean on their oppression. And I call it victimhood, call it whatever, but that creates a condition that's generational. It can perpetuate itself. 4-syllable word. That's pretty good. Perpetuate. Then I think a lot of times people will go to the negative just out of fear of disappointment. If you expect everything to be worse or expect everything to go wrong, it's like a defense mechanism. If you anticipate negative outcomes and they happen, okay, that's what we expected. Hey, yeah, like I said, that's the worst case scenario, and that's what happened. So I think that way they're not disappointed, or they're not surprised, or they can say, "I told you so." What a horrible "I told you so." Come on, let's pick something a little more positive there. And then a lot of it, I think so much has been said about mental health, and depression can lead to these things, anxiety, that negative thinking. I believe you get stuck in that. And what's the word? Catastrophizing. Catastrophizing, meaning it's always worst case scenario. That's what you go to. And then you build up from there. But a lot of people, they can't build up from there. Well, these people are no fun to be around. And I love to seek out the positive things in that. That's my nature. I get accused of being not realistic. The opposite of worst case scenario is, hey, best case scenario. Boom. That's the way I like to look at things, though. Okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? All right, that's what we're going to deal with. But also, what about, they don't even consider if everything goes right. Because then that would lead to the opposite of some of these things. And they would be disappointed, and they would be failing. They wouldn't measure up to someone else's expectations. So I think that's why, those reasons are why some people more than others tend to be negative. The thing is, what are the chances of that worst case scenario actually happening? Think about it. What are the chances that everything is going to go wrong? And so I'm not selling here. I'm just trying to understand, honestly. And emotionally, I can sell. Everything's not going to go wrong. Everything's not going to go right. But what if some things are in the middle, and then occasionally something goes right, and we can build some positive momentum? That's the way I like to operate. But let's talk about why, or what is the probability of everything going wrong? Worst case scenario. Well, statistically, worst case scenarios are very rare. I mean, negative things happen, but for everything to go wrong, there has got to be a coordinated effort and coincidence for things to line up for that domino to fall negative every time. I mean, even in a game of cards, the probabilities of you being below 7 every time, well, that's not very good. Well, the chances in real life, because most things aren't just you in a vacuum. They depend on other people. They depend on situations. They depend on circumstances. And the probability of all of that going wrong, very rare, if ever. They say, what is a plane crash? The chances of a plane crash are 1 in 11 million. Well, people won't fly because of that. Yeah. I mean, you can say it. I understand fear of flying, but honestly, the fear of flying, I don't think it's because of the plane crash. I think it's because of fear of flying, not crashing. People who are afraid to fly don't like hearing that it's the safest mode of transportation. You're much more likely to die in a car accident. I mean, the odds are much more like, so they don't fly. And hey, do whatever you want, but it's not fear of crashing. That's not what it is. It's the fear of the unknown. If you haven't flown before, maybe you had an experience with turbulence, but whatever. But the chances of everything going wrong are even greater than that. So just a statistical probability of worst case scenario is silly. And I think the psychological side, everything going wrong, I think that's because we overestimate risks. Now, I usually underestimate. If you talk about money, I risk a lot with money. If you talk about the safety of my family, okay, now let's be safe there. I may take risks if it's just me, or if it's even me and my wife. Sorry, darling. But if it's family and the risks, okay. But when you talk about overall, I think people who are more negative, they overestimate the risks. You know, they judge that likelihood of something being negative as higher or not worth the reward. You know, you look on the news. My goodness, you look at the news, and there's no such thing as good news anymore when you look at the way they report things. Oh, whether it's the economy or a natural disaster or a plane crash or a war, that's all you're seeing. There, you don't see that. You don't see them reporting the plane landed safely. You know, we thought it was going to be a tornado, but it turned out to be a little sprinkle. And look at the beautiful flowers that came. You don't see that. So I think we are, in some degree, wired to overestimate risks, and which gives you a negative bias. That the brain is going to weigh the possibilities, and if you are risk averse, you're going to pay more attention to the negatives. That without looking at the positives. That's why most entrepreneurs or even inventors, they're more positive. You look at the great inventors of yore. I mean, I read Thomas Edison's biography long time ago. I mean, I might have been in grade school, maybe middle school, I don't know. But how many times he failed at certain things. And he would write it down, he would document it, but he'd try again. Well, every time he thought, well, there's a chance. And he focused on the chance that this time may be it. I've known inventors in my life who, a lot of times the things that were invented were not the intention. And there's a lot of, the Post-it notes. That was something else. They were trying to do this, but they found that. But it's that, let's try it. Something good can happen. That doesn't exist with the people we're talking about because we overestimate risk rather than the reward. And then I think sometimes this might not be a popular opinion. I think a lot of times we err to worst case scenario because chances are it's going to be right down the middle. It's not going to be best case scenario. But it's not going to be worst case scenario. So somewhere in between, and that's boring. That's boring. The probable outcome is a little bit of both, that's realistic. Anybody you talk to, if you talk about going on a trip, tomorrow I'm going to drive to Southern California. All right. Well, what's worst case scenario? I don't make it. Traffic is horrible. It rains the whole way. There's a lot of bad things, but along with that, there's going to be positive all the way. And that's boring. That's travel. That's normal. There's no drama in boring. And so worst case scenario people like to bring that up. The Debbie Downers, they like to bring that up. I mean, if at work you worry about getting fired, well, there's a lot going to happen, but that's worst case scenario. You get fired. Well, actually, that's not worst case scenario. That's a bad thing, but in reality, the likely outcome would be you get in trouble, you get a warning, you get some feedback, and you get a chance to improve. Now, if that's happened over and over, you might get fired. Well, let's go back to the Chinese farmer. Oh, I got fired. Oh, that's horrible. Well, maybe that's an opportunity to get a new job. You didn't like that job anyway. Now you're relieved of that. You got to find a way to make a living. But even that is not worst case scenario. So there's a lot of drama involved in that. And then I think sometimes we want to, the reason the chances of it being total worst case scenario is not probable is because we don't let it be worst case scenario. We intervene. We come in and we'll take action to moderate that, to keep it from being so bad. You look at the weather. Okay, we got a hurricane coming in. We don't let worst case scenarios happen anymore. We evacuate. We prepare ahead of time to reduce worst case scenario. If a business is failing, we bring in steps. If we don't have the brain power, we may bring in consultants. We may do something else. We won't let worst case scenario happen because we intervene. So that's another reason why it's not probable. And two, you think about it. What is the worst case scenario, but what is the worst case possibility? Our worst case scenario are things that we can imagine. And it's not really the worst thing. I mean, it could always be worse, no matter what. You think you've got it bad, you'll find somebody that's got it worse. And so we play with that term, worst case scenario. If you're afraid of public speaking because you're afraid you're going to embarrass yourself, but I guess the worst thing could happen is you embarrass yourself, but you cause a riot. And people get hurt. People maybe get injured. The place gets wrecked. That's worse than you embarrassing yourself, right? But all you're worried about is talking in front of people. Maybe they burn the building down and so you can get extreme and dramatic with this. Chances of you embarrassing yourself, I would even say probable. When I speak in public, the chances of me embarrassing myself, that's pretty good. I'll give it 70-30. I don't care. I'm gloriously ambivalent. So that's not the worst case scenario. I guess worst case scenario is I get assassinated while I'm speaking. Woo! Dave, you're getting dark. Well, hey, there's worst case, and then there's worst case. So just to tie that up, worst case scenario very, very rarely happens. And if it does, we deal with it, right? We deal with it in some way. We don't just give up everything. I don't even think most people expect it. But it's easy. It's really lazy when you think about it. So let's stop this and let's draw the line, Dave. Quit trying to be positive. The worst thing. What's the worst thing that can happen? What is the worst thing that can happen? And, taking that worst case scenario into a more positive and productive mindset, it takes practice. And so you have to evolve that mindset. But to lean into it a little bit, all right, what's the worst thing that can happen? Tonight, Steph and I are going to go out with some friends. I hadn't seen them in a while. What's the worst thing that can happen? We could be late. Traffic could be bad. We could pick a place to go eat and the food's bad. The service is bad. Oh, that's horrible. Maybe we want to go out afterwards and listen to some music and the band sucks. Oh, they're horrible. They play songs we don't like. They won't play any songs that we do like. Maybe a couple of, then maybe we have too much to drink and we feel awful tomorrow and it ruins tomorrow. That's worst case scenario. Can anybody think of something else? Get food. Food poisoning from the meal. Oh, goodness gracious. Coming out both ends. How about that? All right. What else? What else could happen? My wife's shoes can hurt her feet to the point to where she can't even walk tomorrow, and she's got some stuff that she wants to do. And that would be horrible. Maybe I'll rip my pants. Maybe I get sick and throw up all over the dance floor. Okay. What else? The couple we're with, they get in a fight and end up splitting up. Oh. See what I'm doing? See, what are the chances of all that happening? And I'll tell you, even if all that happens, what a story that would be. I mean, I'm already thinking about it. What a story. Remember the time y'all came to Vegas? All of that. See, something good. You can't have worst case scenario. Even when I tried to. Okay, so let's say all that. That's the expectation tonight. Okay? All right. So in reality, we're driving there. Traffic's about what we thought. We got there about the right time. Okay, that's already out the window. It's so good to see them. And we're thinking about, okay, where do you want to go eat? Well, there's several places here. And if the food is mediocre and the service is mediocre, we're going to have a great time because we're going to be talking about catching up. So that's gone. That's not even worst case scenario. There's so many places to hear music. If we don't like it, we'll just go to another place. Okay, let's say we get a little tummy ache. Well, we'll take care of that. We'll deal with it. Somebody gets food poisoning, we're not going to continue. All right, go to the room, rest, get some rest. You'll get better and blah, blah. We're not going to continue down that road. That's where we talked earlier. We will intervene. We'll take care of that. The chances of all of that happening, almost impossible. The chances of some of it happening, okay, I'll give you that. However, everything above that worst case scenario I just said, gravy. We're coming out ahead. And if most doesn't go wrong, it's fantastic. So how do you get past that horrible habit of focusing on worst case scenario? And I think it's simple because I don't deal with it. But I deal with a lot of people who go there. Sip a Mountain Dew. And so the first thing is, it's just you got to have a reality check. Here's what I'm thinking. Well, how likely is that scenario? Really? That one I just laid out in front of you? How likely is all that will happen? I mean, you look at past experiences. Yeah, you can take a snippet from each thing. And yeah, if all of that, please. Past experiences, just statistics. You're not going to let that happen because now when you make plans, it's based on your history. So ground yourself in reality rather than emotion or fear of something happening. Some people are so crippled by fear, and I've done the podcast on that they do nothing. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Their fear has crippled them to the point that they don't succeed. If you fear losing your job, just consider how many times you faced challenges and you found a solution. You didn't fail every time. You found a solution. So work on productivity, work on performance, work on interpersonal relationships, intervene, and don't lose your job because of fear of intervening and doing something about it. So, all right. So just think, all right, what's the likelihood of all of this happening tonight? Very slim. Okay. All right. So let's look at it another way. Reframe that worst case scenario. Ask, okay, and then what? If that happens, okay, how will we react? Instead of stopping at a disaster and thinking, just follow that chain of events. Think, what would I actually do if this happened? In the South, the weather is on. I go down, spend some time with my dad. The weather's on every 15 minutes. They've got very alarming terms. Serious impact day. That's a day when the weather is going to impact everybody in some way. Well, I mean, they'll scare the crap out of you. We've got snow coming. Oh, they look at fronts, and here's how it's going to affect. And storms are coming, and it's not likely here, but, this area, you're going to get hammered. And, God forbid a tornado or a hurricane come to the area, and they will scare you to death. And it makes they actually go to, for drama or for ratings or whatever, they go to the worst case scenario. So when you ask yourself, should this happen, what will I actually do? Go back to the job thing. If I lose my job, what would I do? Well, you find a new one. Get a side gig. There's always a response to it. So when that happens, I'm not crippled. All right, we get 8 inches of snow. Then what? All right, well, ahead of time, I'll do this, this, and this, so at least I won't be hungry. All right, I might not be able to get out of the house, or if I have to get out of the house, okay, well, I'll plan around that. What do I do? If it happens enough, I think I'll get another vehicle. But you start to plan for that. That's why I said earlier, dwelling on the worst case scenario can lead to a self-fulfilling prophecy. planning for it is fantastic. So, all right, I plan to do this. And if I lose my job, I got to back up here. I'll do that. Okay, if I don't lose my job, I haven't wasted anything. As a matter of fact, I may feel more confident now. I may push the envelope a little more. I may take more risks because the thought of losing my job doesn't have as much weight as it did. You know, I'm in Vegas right now. If we had 8 inches of snow, it's in the spring, so I don't think it's going to happen. But if it did, what would I do? If I prepare for it and get everything, got a house full of food and drink, and okay, I got Netflix, we can just sit in, we can hunker down, and we'll be okay. All right? I'm not scared of that snowstorm. If the snowstorm doesn't happen, it's all gravy. So I don't think it's bad to occasionally think of the worst case scenario as long as you're going to plan for it rather than be crippled by it. Then if it doesn't happen, making gravy, baby. Making gravy. So to train yourself to focus on what you can control, that's the main thing. You can't control the weather. And I'm telling you, I'm not beating up on weather people. Really, I'm not. I'm going to come close. As smart as they are, they know. Meteorologists know weather. They know it. However, their track record on nailing it every time is not very good. So even though they say it's going to happen, okay, that helps you prepare, okay, you can. But you can't control it. Focus on what you can control. If you give fear all the energy, that's going to impact you. But look at the actions that you can take. Make a list if you want. Here's a list of things I need to do. If this event can happen at this point, I need to be ready ahead of time. And then that way you can improve your situation or minimize the risk if everything goes to hell in a handbasket. If you're worried in school, if you're worried about failing an exam, and that's it. I've had friends who did that. They just lived in fear of the exam. Well, that time you were afraid, you could have spent that time studying. Preparation. Big on preparation. You prepare for the worst so that it doesn't happen. You're making gravy instead of wallowing in it. But a lack of activity, a lack of preparation, you've created the worst case scenario. Now, I have shown up times for exams in school, and I was not a model student. I made good grades. I was not a model student. And you would hear people that, I studied for 3 days. I've been studying all weekend. And what? We've got an exam today? Yeah. Oh, yeah. You didn't study? I forgot about it. Well, I wasn't afraid. I was a little stunned, but I got through it. And, I made okay grades. I'm not suggesting you do that. But what I'm talking about is I actually made better grades than the 2 people I was talking about. And they were crippled with fear for 3 days through an entire weekend. When you do that, that affects your preparation. And it affects the outcome. Now, please study for your tests. Don't wait till the last minute, and surely don't forget about it. I probably skipped class and didn't hear the announcement. However, my point is when you focus on the fear of what could happen rather than the preparation for worst case scenario, you're in a much worse situation. I've learned to do, the technique I use. Okay, what's the worst thing that could happen? All right. And I go dark, deep, absolute worst thing. Okay, flip it. What's the best thing that could happen? What if everything goes wrong? What if everything goes right? Now, you're probably, like we said before, it's boring, but you're going to be somewhere in the middle. Yeah, but train your brain to look at the positives. If traffic's good, we could get there early. If the food is really good, then we can tell friends we'll come back here again. And you don't brag on don't brag on a restaurant by saying, hey, I never get food poisoning there. But it's great. We'll come back. Oh, next time I want to try that on the menu. And it's a positive thing. And as the night unveils, there's so much good. You know, if that place is open, we'll go there after. So that would be great if this works out. So start looking at what could happen. And if nothing else, you'll be much more fun to be around. You know, train your brain to look for opportunities. You know, that meeting, if this comes up, it's a tough topic, but it needs to be addressed. If this comes up, I'm going to nail it. I'm going to hit it head on. I'm not just going to sit there and agree with everybody. I'm going to say, instead of this, why don't we take this to the next level? I'll lead a team if I need to, and I'll take responsibility. But I think we need to go out on a limb with this sales strategy, with this marketing deal. Be the thought leader for a change. What's the worst thing can happen? What you're already doing. Nothing. You know, and then of course, if you go that way and it crashes and burns and you embarrass yourself, okay, that'd be embarrassing. Yeah. But the company will be no worse off. You'll still be doing status quo as what you did before. What if it succeeds? That's what you've got to train yourself to look at. You know, if you're nervous about starting a business, which, you know, a lot of people start with a side hustle and then it gets bigger and whatever, but those people who never tried, but consider the potential of it doing well and succeeding and all that you're going to learn and the different, you know, the difference in your social activities and your interaction with people and the freedom that you can gain from some of the stuff that you have to do now because you have started a successful business. That's the difference in an entrepreneur and someone that sits around bitching about how bad their job is. So what could go right? What could happen? And then I say it all the time. And I would like to look at it from different angles. And I will. I'm trying to find a way that this resonates in a different way. But you've got to be grateful. If everything is doom and gloom, that's a lack of gratitude. I get on Christians all the time that talk about faith and then they worry all the time. You hypocrite. Give me a break. Gratitude. Because gratitude makes you, in a tough time, it makes you look back a little. Look what you've got, but look at what I've overcome. Yeah, this may be a setback, or that could set me back, but I've been through a lot, and I'm more resilient now. So I am grateful for my resilience. And my wife, even we've been married for our entire lives, even now, she's getting a peek behind the curtain of some of the things that I've done through the years when we had challenging times. I mean, we're communicating much better, and it's good. But sometimes I save her from some of the mechanisms of finance. I just let her do what she wants to do, and as long as there's money in the bank and she can do it, it's fine. Well, now I'm letting her see okay, here's how we do this, and here's how we do that, and it's eye-opening. I am confident in the outcomes because I'm resilient. I understand what I have. I'm so grateful and thankful for it because worst case scenario, I wouldn't have any of this. So that resilience in thinking makes me, I have to consciously focus on a possible worst case scenario. Others don't have that. It's because they don't have that gratitude and that resilience mindset. You know, regularly reflecting on things that are going well. Okay, let's just focus on it. Worst case scenario? Okay, let's take a second and practice some gratitude and look. Look at the gravy, man. Worst case scenario would not generate this gravy. That didn't happen. So we've got this. That didn't happen. Oh, so now we've got that. And it takes It takes a moment to really look at it and be unbiased. Some people want to find the negative. Yeah, but that gravy bowl's got a crack in it. We're just putting it in regular bowls, man. We need a gravy boat, please. Whoever uses a gravy boat. I think my mom had a couple of gravy boats, but please, you get a gravy in a big bowl with a spoon. You know what you do, though? You get a biscuit and dunk it in the gravy. Gravy is what happens when the worst case scenario doesn't. And it's everywhere. So it's not a worst case scenario thinking. It can be valuable if you will realistically look at it and admit it didn't happen. So in that case, I'll help you. I'll lean in. I'll give you think of your worst case scenario, and I bet I can give you one that's worse. And I've done this from time to time, and people see how dark I can get. I listen to a lot of metal. Ooh. And you want dark? I can get dark. Sometimes you have to go dark to be able to see the light. But the worst case scenario, thinking, it can be a tool, but it's not your destination. Because the chances of it happening are not good. They're almost a guarantee not to happen. So I am not giving up on making you positive. Come on. Or I don't plan to rewire anybody to think good and happiness wins every step of the way. But I believe good wins eventually. And if you believe that, there's hope for happiness. And I think it is automatic when you observe that it's happened. I really do. I mean, we can go negative to get to a good place or get to that confident mindset, because we can say, see, that worst case scenario didn't happen. Gravy. That one did, and then that sucked. However, what came from that? Okay, you're not going to do that again. You know, the kid that goes to the stove and touches a hot pan. Ooh, at that point, that was horrible. They burned themselves. You can't get much worse unless they, severely burn themselves, or, they lose a hand, or they catch the house on fire and all that. Okay, well, that all didn't happen. They burned themselves. That was bad. Crying, maybe a little scar, a wound. I've got scars from as a kid when I did something dumb. It's not worst case scenario. They lived. It hurt. They learned a lesson. That's hot. Don't touch it. Okay. Boom. There's the gravy. So sometimes you do have to look for it. But preparing for that worst case scenario, it doesn't mean you're expecting to happen. It means you be ready for it. So how do we prepare? How do we prepare? 5, you're going to have positive outcomes for preparing for worst case scenarios. They're probably not going to happen. We've covered that. But preparing for a worst case scenario. So you can think negative if you want, but prepare for it. Oh, that exam's going to kick my butt. Okay, I need to study. I've got a physical coming up. Okay, I need to do this. You have some sort of physical challenge or mental challenge or a challenge at work, a big presentation at work. Okay, all right. I'm going to suck. I'm going to get fired, and I'm going to get shamed in the public square. All right. Well, I better prepare then, right? So what can we do to prepare for it and have positive outcomes of worst case scenarios? First of all, the more you prepare, the more confident you're going to be. The more worst case scenarios or close calls you go through, the more resilient you're going to be. So resilience and confidence are 2 of the best tools. You talk about sales. If you're confident and resilient, you're going to outperform most of your peers, if not all. When you have a plan for when you have setbacks, you're less risk averse. You don't care as much because you know what to do. I know what to do. When you're in anything where maybe it's your first time to do it, but you're with somebody who's done it a ton, and how good do you feel when you see an obstacle coming up and they say, "Oh, don't worry, I've done this a million times. I know what to do." You automatically feel better. you can be that person with worst case scenarios. Knowing how to handle difficult situations, I don't know if it makes you fearless, but it makes you fear less. And then you attack it because you're confident and you got resilience. So that's one thing that comes from worst case scenario preparation. Another one is, it's really tied to it, but under pressure, you make better decisions. If you plan for the worst case scenario, you're using some critical thinking. You know, and a lot of it is, you know, in travel, just in general travel. You know, I got to be 10 different places in a week. And, you know, I've said it many times, man, we can do it, but everything's got to go perfectly. It does not. But we think about that, because if we say that, we're going to plan more. You know, you plan worst case scenarios. You know, if that happens, okay, that's a tight connection. If that flight gets delayed or I miss that flight, worst case scenario, all right, here, worst case scenario, I'll rent a car and I'll drive it. I'll get less sleep that night, but I'll still be there the next morning. All right, cool. All right, that's not worst case scenario. Worst case scenario would actually be no rental cars. Now, how do I get there? You know, it's a long drive. I can't Uber that. So see, you plan for these things. Then when the flight's on time, gravy. You got gravy in your carry-on. See what I mean? That you make better decisions under pressure. I remember the time, and I think I've shared this, but I'll do it again. I only have about 5 stories. I just tell them over and over. But I remember the time my wife and I were going to San Antonio. We've never been to San Antonio before. And I got delayed out of New York. I was supposed to land at, 8 the night before. We were flying out of San Antonio at 7:30 the next day out of Nashville. And so flight got delayed. Flight ended up getting canceled. The only solution I had was later on catch a flight into Louisville, Kentucky, get in a rental car, driving down. And so that's what I did. Well, I'd been up for, 24 hours. And so I get into Louisville, Kentucky. It's about a 4 or 5 hour drive, if I remember correctly, maybe a little bit longer. And so I've got to, all right, okay, I got the rental car. It's fantastic. As a matter of fact, I made the reservation for the rental car while I was in line to get on the plane to Louisville. So I had the car. I know the car is waiting on me. In a perfect world, well, in reality, a lot of times that car's not waiting. The whole Seinfeld skit. You made the reservation, it was there. But I was so tired. And I'm thinking, I kept looking at the clock. All right, I get there. If nothing happens, I'll get there by 4:30 in the morning. Our flight's not till 7:30. Well, I'm sleepy. So as I'm leaving the airport, I'm thinking, oh man, I'm gonna fall asleep. And I see a White Castle restaurant. They're open. This particular one was open 24 hours. I get a sack of White Castles. And those are the little square, if you don't know what White Castle. The same thing as a Crystal Burger, only a little different. But it's the same principle. You eat the gut bombs is what they are. And I'm thinking, I'll get that and put chili on them. And by the time, if nothing else, my nausea will keep me awake. Well, it was rough. I got out of Coke. I stopped. I'm thinking, okay, I'll stop in the gas station. I'll get an energy drink. I'll get something. And I'm thinking, you know what? I've got to stay awake. I've got to arrive alive. I bought a pack of cigarettes. I don't smoke. I did that night. I'm eating White Castles, smoking Winstons like it's my job. No problem going to sleep. So I finally get in. It's like 4:30 in the morning. And my poor wife, she was, I'm there in plenty of time. I can shower, I can do whatever, and then we're going to go to San Antonio for a romantic weekend. She opens the door and is so glad to see me, and she gets this rush of bad breath from bad burgers and mustard and onions and smoke. So it sounded worst case scenario. I got there. I probably took a few years off my life because of my bad health decisions. Worst case scenario was not as bad. There were people in bars in LaGuardia Airport who had already given up on their trip. Heck no, I'm going to get home and I'm going to go away with my wife, no matter what I smell like when I get there. So that's decision making under pressure. If this happens, boom. What are my alternatives? Boom. Over time, you just get better at thinking of this stuff. I've been through this before. Now I can get another flight. I can get a rental car. There's a shuttle. Who knows what else? And if all of those fail, okay, what else can I do? And you learn to go through the possibilities quicker, worse than dwelling on poor, pitiful me. And then you have strategies going forward. So you get more creative. You get stronger problem solving through your creativity. And now the options are much greater than they were 20 years ago. I mean, most people now, they couldn't survive without, without Uber or without a cell phone or without mapping. I don't think I could either. However, we had the same crises 20 years ago without the technology. Somehow we made it happen. And now you can get creative with some of these things. Business, personal life, emergencies that happen. And an emergency can happen at any time, anywhere. An emergency can happen at home when I am across the country. And how do you prepare for that? And it's not fatalistic to prepare for it. It's fatalistic to succumb to it and think there's nothing you can do. So you get creative with this stuff. And then when all this happens enough, and we talk about resilience and confidence, but you have a greater sense of stability, of security. Not that you're bulletproof and immune to everything, but you almost feel like I can handle whatever comes my way. Whether it's finances and your financial planning. Yeah, I've been here before, and here's what I'll do. And you know what? I'm going to do this now to prepare in case this happens in the future. Career backup plans. People downside. You may not get fired. The company may be sold, and they come in and, hey, that career path is no longer an option. Everybody talks about emergency preparedness. Yeah, they're laid out plans for that. Well, that's also true in real life. And then when the emergencies don't happen, you got to prepare for all the gravy, man. It's great. Contingencies. If you have a contingency, an if-then statement, if this happens, then here's what I'll do. It's fantastic. And over time, you build these. Yeah, we're all scared early on. Yeah, we're unsure of ourselves. You build that over time, and worst case scenarios or fear of a worst case scenario, it prepares us. And two, it prepares you, and we'll talk on the gravy for a second. It prepares you for success. You prepare for the worst case scenario. All right. When it doesn't happen, there's opportunity. And you see that. And that darkness, now there's more light. You're preparing, all that preparation for the worst, it reveals hidden opportunities because you weren't even looking for it. A business owner, they're preparing for a downturn. We've seen this so many times. And then they do that so they may start a new revenue stream. They may actually go call on new customers to have more, diversify their portfolio. Okay. They get that. I got another income stream coming over here. I've got all these new customers. We saw people that were heavy in either government, business, or aerospace. When that took a downturn, they reached out and branched out into other stuff. Okay. Then when the economy came back, boom, they were much bigger. They had a bigger piece of a bigger pie. What if that downturn hadn't happened? Then it would have been massive. But they see those hidden opportunities. And that improves your efficiency. It improves your long-term success, which was not a worst case scenario. I get excited thinking about it. And I don't, people that expect the worst, they're not even going to get it. But the chances are, the people that expect the best but prepare for the worst, those are the ones that you like to be around. Those are the ones that are going to succeed no matter what. Those are the ones that, I remember the old, the story, and it's been told many times, but It hadn't rained in this community in a long time, and they decided we're going to have a revival, and we're going to all get together, and we're going to pray for rain. That's what we're going to do. We're going to put it on God. And they get there, and not one person brought an umbrella. Yeah. Do you expect it to happen that way? You know? So, don't expect the worst, but prepare for it. Notice the gravy. And then that's going to make you more positive, more resilient, and more confident. All right. All this talk about gravy has made me hungry. So thanks so much for joining. I appreciate it. Hit me up at david@otalks.com or dave@otalks.com. Hit otalks.com and you'll see all the stuff. I don't sell my stuff, but you can buy it there. And then we'll keep going. Got some exciting things happening, and I'm pumped up. So thanks for joining. Thanks for the support. But most of all, thanks for talking with Dave. Giddy up.